we're going to live together. If you don't like it, you can leave. My husband was with a small child. A girl, perhaps around 2 years old. Confused by the unexpected situation, I asked my husband. What does this mean? You suddenly brought a child, and just like that. This is my daughter. You never went through with fertility treatments, did you? That's why I brought her. How could you? I was shocked. Was my husband having an affair? I wondered what I should do and slumped down in a chair. Then I noticed the little girl looking at me anxiously. I stared at her familiar face and came to a realization. I'd welcome this girl with open arms. Saying that without thinking, I decided to reveal the truth. Upon hearing this, his face turned pale. And from there on, my life was about to change dramatically. I am Tracy, turning 30 this year. After graduating from graduate school, I had been dedicated solely to my research. Sometimes my work kept me so busy I didn't get home until the next day. And after work, I slept like a log. I hardly ever had a chance to meet men. At this rate, I might end up single for life. I am not the type that typically attracts men. I have specialized knowledge and often engage in various interests, which naturally increases my knowledge. And with men, I freely speak my mind without holding back. As a result, men tend to dislike women who flaunt their knowledge. Even at matchmaking parties organized by friends, I ended up sinking. While my friends paired up and left with men, I returned home alone. So, I thought marriage was not in my cards. Somewhat resigned, I threw myself into my work. However, as my friends got married and started families, conversations about married life and children became more common. Even my colleagues from the same lab, whom I considered comrades, found wonderful partners. While I felt internally rushed, I could only vaguely think about romance. I thought, there's no use rushing. I guess it's fine if a good person appears someday. At that time, my friend Mandy talked to me about fertility treatments. And then she made an unexpected proposal. It might be strange to ask you this, Tracy, but could you donate an egg? What? Egg donation? I can't produce eggs. So, egg donation is the only option left. Tracy, you're excellent, and a really good person. Since I can't have my own eggs, I thought your genes would be great. Is it okay? Mandy looked down anxiously. She was my rival, my best friend, and like a sister to me. I met her at our college and we had been researching and striving together ever since. She is as important as family to me, and I couldn't refuse her request. If mine are okay, then please use them. Thank you. Mandy thanked me with tears. Although I was initially surprised, I was truly glad to accept, seeing how happy it made her. The procedure went smoothly, and within 3 months, a new life would be growing inside her belly. When she showed me the ultrasound photo, I was moved as if it were my own child. Seeing a life I had only read about in textbooks and books now inside Mandy's belly was an indescribable thrill. It's amazing. There really is a life there. It's all thanks to you, Tracy. I appreciate it. As I caressed her belly, she expressed her gratitude again. 1 month later, I too had a fateful encounter. It happened at a matchmaking party. I was forcibly taken to by the unmarried members of the lab. Tracy, you're knowledgeable, and your stories are really interesting. Tell me more. That was where I first met Kevin, who would later become my husband. He was a curious man who, unlike most men, seemed genuinely interested in the detailed knowledge that others might find off-putting. Moreover, he kept asking to hear more. He was the first man I had met who was such a good listener. Carried away by his attentiveness, we exchanged contact information. I had never had a boyfriend even at the age of 25, and thought he might drift away as well. Pushed by him, we went on many dates, and before I knew it, he had proposed. I fell in love with you the moment I met you. Will you marry me? I stared at the single diamond glittering in his large hand. He was endearing, with a large build but a personality as cute as a puppy's. Surely, the time I would spend with him would be fun and comforting. I am not so confident, but I look forward to living with you. I answered politely. Relieved, he showed a smiling face. For the first time, his adorable smile made my heart flutter. After that, we got married. His job involved a lot of interaction with people, unlike mine, and we decided to have a big wedding. I had said a family-only ceremony would be fine. They say a man isn't really mature until he's married. For my position at work, I want to invite colleagues and business contacts. Thinking of what I could do as his wife led to a grand ceremony with many of his work contacts celebrating with us. We enjoyed our newlywed life without major arguments. Today is your birthday, so I've reserved a restaurant. What time do you think you'll finish work? Really? I'm so happy. I'll come home early today. Thanks for everything. I should be the one thanking you a lot. You always take care of the house, even though you're busy with work every day. I'm happy to hear you say that, Kevin. See you tonight. With that, we embraced and headed off to our respective jobs. One day, I was thinking about having a child with my husband when he was assigned to go on a business trip abroad. How long will you be gone? I'm not sure when I'll be able to return. But considering my promotion, I can't turn it down. Sorry. What about having children? I was thinking it might be time. There's also IVF now, and you should start preparing your body, Tracy. It's better to start young. Let's have children through IVF. I couldn't say no to my husband, who insisted on this. He wanted a promotion, and being in sales, his work perspective was different from mine. Maybe this was inevitable, I thought, as I saw him off. I went to the hospital to start fertility treatments. I prepared my body to coincide with my husband's next return home and had my eggs collected. 6 months later, when my husband came home temporarily, I took him to the hospital to collect his sperm. However, he left immediately after greeting his workplace and visiting the hospital. At that time, I hurriedly saw him off. Later, when I heard the test results, I was confused. It turned out my husband had azoospermia. We couldn't conceive a child this way. But I couldn't immediately convey such a fact. Even on the phone with my husband, I struggled to disclose this truth. As I wondered what to do, the frequency of his calls began to decrease. When will you be back next? I really can't get away from work, sorry. He kept saying that. Before I realized it, 3 years had passed since he went on a business trip abroad. Over these 3 years, I had gotten used to being on my own and lived quite freely. I had wanted to experience the joy of carrying my own child like Mandy. But as time passed, those feelings naturally faded. Then, one day, I received a phone call. It was from my husband. Hello, Tracy? Kevin, it's been a while. How have you been?
Yeah.
I'm fine. How about you, Tracy? Yes, I'm fine. What's up? Well, actually, I can return to the US now. Really? Is it just a temporary return? No, my work here is done. I'm coming back home. When are you coming back? In 2 weeks. Understood. I'll prepare some delicious food. I promised him and hung up the phone. Although I responded calmly on the phone, I was inwardly very happy about his return. He had gone on a business trip abroad not long after we got married. and I couldn't help but feel lonely. I spent my days planning the menu for his return and cleaning the room, eagerly awaiting that day. However, I was soon reminded that reality was not always so sweet. As soon as he returned home, he said, "We're going to live together. If you don't like it, you can leave." My husband was with a small child. A girl, perhaps around 2 years old. Confused by the unexpected situation, I asked my husband, what does this mean? You suddenly brought a child, and just like that. This is my daughter. You never went through with fertility treatments, did you? That's why I brought her. How could you? I was shocked. Was my husband having an affair? I wondered what I should do and slumped down in a chair. Then I noticed the little girl looking at me anxiously. I stared at her familiar face and came to a realization. I'd welcome this girl with open arms. I said that spontaneously. Now it was his turn to be shocked by my changed demeanor. Hey. What do you mean? You're my husband. Didn't you notice? This child and we look alike. I said that and lifted the girl up to show how similar we were. The girl looked at me curiously but did not reject me. Huh? What? What does that mean? My husband couldn't understand and looked confused. I then told him the truth. Kevin, I never told you, but I've been donating eggs both in the US and abroad. It started when I donated eggs to a friend. Egg donation? What? Even if you don't understand, it's fine. Her name is Christina, right? I donated eggs to someone abroad. And they sent me pictures of the child a few times. That's how I recognized her. This child is truly mine. We can even do a DNA test. I'm more than happy to live together. What? His face turned pale as he faced this unexpected truth. I looked down at him, the betrayer, and delivered even more shocking news. By the way, Kevin, it seems you have azoospermia. Do you remember going to the hospital once before? That was the test result from that time, according to the doctor. What? I have azoospermia? That's impossible. Look, I have a child right here. Like you had an affair, were you cheated on too? Don't say such ridiculous things. Don't raise your voice. Christina will be startled. As I said that, Kevin lowered his voice. She was already tearful. After feeding Christina, I put her down for a nap. Despite being in a new place, she slept peacefully, breathing softly. Unexpectedly having a daughter, my cheeks were constantly flushed with joy. Later, I suggested a DNA test to my husband. He was adamant that she was his daughter. But it was clear to me that the results would be disappointing for him. There's no possibility of you being the father. But I have a 99% chance of being the mother, see? That can't be. But, Jasmine said she was my child. Jasmine wanted a child from her husband and requested an egg donation. By husband, she meant you? No, I just spent one night with her. Is that so? What were you planning to do if I left the house? I was going to be with Jasmine, we had promised that. I see. Thanks for confessing. What? Why would I stay with someone who had an affair? Once the adoption with Christina is finalized, I want a divorce. After I firmly said this, he silently left the room. I then hired a lawyer to proceed with the divorce and the adoption process with Christina. A month later, Kevin, who had been absent, showed up. I don't want a divorce. Don't abandon me. He clung to me, crying. As I struggled with how to respond, he began confessing all his misdeeds. He had gone to see his affair partner after failing to reach her by phone. And found she had already moved. He had hired a detective to find her, only to learn that Christina was the child of the woman and her husband. Kevin had been the affair partner. Furthermore, he was told that the relationship between the woman and her husband had deteriorated, and that they planned to pass Christina off to Kevin. I was deceived. I've come to understand that the one I need to cherish is you, Tracy. I've confessed everything I did. So please, don't divorce me. I beg you. He must have thought I would forgive him if he confessed everything. However, that was not the case. I was very happy when I married you. I was so pleased when you said you found my stories interesting and wanted to hear more. I thought my days with you would be fun. I wanted children too, but when I learned you were infertile, it was hard for me to tell you because I thought it would hurt you too. So I decided it was okay if we couldn't have children. Being with you was more important then. But I have no intention of staying with someone who betrayed me. I'm not that cheap. I'm going to divorce you. What about me? How do you think I'll look? Do you know how many people from work I invited to our wedding? You invited them, right? I said a family wedding would be fine. But you wanted to solidify your position at work. If that's so important, you shouldn't have had an affair. Are you saying it's okay for me to be seen as the bad guy? Well, you are the bad guy, aren't you? As I said this with a smile, he hung his head low. He had been sprawled out at the entrance for a while. But by the time I was done caring for Christina, he was gone. After that, through the lawyer, I divorced him. At my workplace, my ex-husband became known as the worst kind of jerk who had an affair and fathered a child. This fact naturally spread among my colleagues and their partners. Among them were colleagues from his workplace. I heard from one of them that he had even lied about the reasons for our divorce at his job. My wife didn't do housework or take care of the kids. And while I was on a business trip abroad, she got pregnant with another man. I'm the victim. However, the truth had a greater impact than lies, and ultimately tightened the noose around his own neck. The rumor spread, and he gradually lost his place at work and resigned voluntarily within a month. The compensation I had demanded during the divorce remained unpaid after he quit his job. Shall we collect it? However, I declined. With his social standing taken away, my retribution was essentially complete. Moreover, as I continued my career in research, I wasn't financially struggling. Going forward, I can manage well enough as a single mother raising Christina. I had completely cut ties with him and discarded all memories of him. As time passed, Christina, who was 2 years old then, grew into a 15-year-old teenager. She is going through puberty but has grown up as a mommy's girl. Mom. I got an A on my test. Amazing. Just like my daughter. I stroked her head as she confidently showed me her test. She is aware of her origins. Despite that, she has accepted me. The one who raised me is you, Mom. You're the one I always remember. You've always taken good care of me. No matter how I was born, I'm your child, right? Of course. I laughed and hugged my daughter tightly. There may be tough times ahead. However, together as mother and daughter, we want to live on.
I was in the middle of preparing to move into our newly built house while juggling work. That day I finished work early and decided to stop by the new house before heading home. I was shocked to discover my husband Greg, who was meant to be looking for a job, was actually having an affair with another woman.
Why don't we kick my wife out and live here together?
Really? I'm so happy. So how do you plan to kick out your wife? I was stunned by this unexpected turn of events. But I refused to let things go their way and called Greg's relatives. This is the new house. When I showed Greg's family the new place, guess what? Greg was there, hugging his mistress, Julia, with barely any clothes on. Seeing this, John, my father-in-law, got all angry, went running after my husband, and then my husband did something major that led to a totally unexpected outcome. Since I was young, it had been my dream to own my ideal home. I started saving diligently for my part-time jobs during my student days, working tirelessly to make this dream a reality. Once I graduated and got a diploma, I started working and got really caught up in it, so I didn't really think about dating much. When I turned 30, I met my husband, who also dreamt of owning a home, and we hit it off, thinking we could achieve our dreams faster together. We dated for about a year before getting married. Initially, we lived in a rented apartment, but after 5 years, it was finally time for our dream to become reality. When I was young, I always had a fuzzy idea of owning a home, but now I know exactly what I want. Both my grandparents and parents had always lived in rentals. I didn't feel too inconvenienced by it, but having to get approval for everything was a hassle. My parents used to say, "Any place you live becomes home." They didn't mind the restrictions of renting much, but the longer I lived, the more I wanted to improve things. I strongly felt that the only way to live in a house I could renovate freely was to own it. When I was going over those ideas with the home builder, they introduced me to a woman, Julia, around my age, who's now in charge. She was beautiful even from a woman's perspective, but didn't boast about it. Instead, she was a good listener and responded precisely and clearly to my questions. I felt very comfortable and confident in trusting her with the project. But there were times when my husband overly praised her, which made me start to feel suspicious about his actions. Julia, being praised by Greg, didn't even seem fazed by his compliments, almost like she felt sorry for him. As we were bringing our ideas to life in the house, we went way over our budget. The monthly mortgage payments became quite high. I thought about compromising, but since this was a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, I figured it would be better to just earn more rather than regret compromising later. Originally, I earned more than my husband, and since most of the ideas were mine, I decided I could bear the extra cost. Also, there was talk of a promotion, so it was certain that my income would increase. I requested that we proceed with the project despite being over our budget. When we decided to get married, my husband and I had discussed and set our priorities. The top priority was the house. We wanted to have a home that was close to what we wanted without giving up too much. We planned to continue working until the mortgage was paid off. And when it comes to having kids, our families will probably bring it up once we're married, but we'll talk about it when we're both ready. We were really looking forward to not having any kids in our marriage. That's why I didn't mind investing most of our earnings in the home. But this agreement we had would later collapse. After a while, my promotion was confirmed, and I became even more dedicated to my work. There were days when I couldn't go home early due to handling over responsibilities to my team members, and sometimes I had to work on weekends to keep up. My husband, having plenty of time with a 9-to-5 job and no overtime or weekend work, started taking over more of the discussions about the new house. We used to meet at Julia's office, but now she's always at our place acting like it's a meeting place as we finish the new house. "Did you have a meeting with Julia at our house today? Why can't you just go to her office instead? What did you guys talk about? How's the progress going?" I asked my husband many questions. To these he responded,
"We talked about the details, and various things," refusing to elaborate further.
What does various things mean? I wanted to ask more, but since I had been too busy and left the new house matters to my husband, I felt guilty and couldn't press him further.
"If it bothers you that much, why don't you take responsibility?"
he would say, ending the conversation. Worried about being dismissed like that, I didn't pursue it further, but then an unbelievable situation developed. Without consulting me, my husband quit his job. One day, as the completion of our dream home was just around the corner, I noticed my husband was still lounging around the house when it was time to leave for work. I asked him, "Isn't it time for you to go to work?"
"Work? I quit. It's inconvenient to commute from our new place, right?" With your salary increase, we'll manage for now.
And without any remorse, he kept insisting his decision was right, smiling smugly. Are you out of your mind? We thoroughly considered the commute when choosing the location, right? You were the one who said it was okay that only local trains stopped there. And although it's a bit of a walk to the station, it's good for our health, right? My husband replied,
Is that so?
which infuriated me, and I snapped back. Stop being ridiculous. I thought we could manage the extra spending because I was expecting my husband to make more money. Originally, we were supposed to achieve the dream of owning our home with both of us working. Why has it suddenly become just my earnings? Even if he had decided to quit his job, I wished he had discussed it with me first. After venting my frustrations, my husband, not fully grasping the gravity of the situation, asked if I was really that angry. Noticing my unresolved anger, he promised to find a new job within 2 months after we moved in, and we settled the matter on that note. But my distrust only grew deeper. Meanwhile, our long-awaited new home was finally completed. I meticulously customized and imported furniture from abroad, so I decided to fully move in only after everything had arrived. My husband wanted to choose a workplace that would be convenient to commute from our new home, so he frequently walked to the nearest station to explore options. But his job search was not going as well as expected. He wasn't home much because he spent most weekdays at the job center. From his behavior, I believed he was genuinely trying to find a job. I thought it would be better for him to find a stable job that he could keep until retirement, rather than rushing into something short-term. Since a promise is a promise, I decided to wait a little longer and see how things unfolded. One day, I was still forced to work on weekends. As I hurriedly got ready, my husband said he would take care of the household chores, for which I was thankful. It bothered me that he insisted on me leaving early for work, but it was good that he took over the morning chores, allowing me to leave for work with ease. For once, I finished work by early afternoon. I considered going straight home to rest, but thinking my husband would be relaxing by now, I didn't want to disturb him. Instead, I went to our new home to choose curtains, something I had been postponing. There were small windows, and I hadn't yet taken their measurements. My husband had already relaxed at the new home, but I hadn't experienced it yet. I thought it might be nice to eat a late lunch there. So I bought some snacks at the nearest station and arrived at our new home. I was gonna open the door, but weirdly, the lock was already open. What's going on? I grew anxious. I considered calling the police, but then remembered that I had recently installed something. Stepping away from the entrance, I recalled that there had been signs of someone entering our new home before. My new dresser was dirty, and I knew my husband occasionally went to the new home, so I asked him, but he denied bringing anyone there. I believed what my husband said, so I guessed that either robbers were checking things out or troublemakers were hanging around. I had installed security cameras, thinking it would be quicker to provide evidence to the police if something happened, as I couldn't handle it alone. With trembling hands, I took a deep breath to calm myself and checked the camera footage on my smartphone. I was definitely shocked. It wasn't a thief or pranksters. It was my husband cheating with another woman. I shuddered, thinking that all of his odd behavior and the gradual change in his personality were now connected. The betrayal hurt, but I was more dumbfounded than shocked. Thinking back, my husband had exhibited many inexplicable behaviors. Probably the traces of someone else in the house were also from a woman he had brought. The issue was the identity of the woman. Given his sudden resignation, I suspected she might be one of his coworkers. Her back was to the camera, so her face wasn't clear, but as my husband changed positions, her face began to intermittently show in the camera. I zoomed in on the woman's face for a better look and recognized her as Julia from the home builders company. The shock was overwhelming. I had respected and trusted her professionalism. They were both betraying me. Knowing that I trusted Julia, they had the audacity to deceive me. Had my husband aggressively pursued her, or vice versa? They were smirking behind my back, thinking they had successfully fooled me. My shock turned into anger, and I saved the footage. Determined to see this through, I continued watching. My husband was acting so out of character with her. It was like I didn't even know him. I was just so disgusted by their shameful behavior. Julia also shamelessly moaned loudly. After they satisfied themselves, my husband started discussing living together in this house with her. Hearing this, I wondered if he had already arranged to separate from me. I wasn't going to let him get the upper hand. It would be me, not my husband, who would bring up divorce. I had the right to do so. Convinced of this, I called my in-laws and rushed to a nearby hardware store. I bought plenty of tension rods at the hardware store and sealed all the windows and doors on the first floor. I thought they might notice because of the noise, but they were likely too engrossed in their passionate acts, as they were completely unaware of my presence or the noise outside. After securing the entrances with tension rods, my in-laws arrived. I had called them over suddenly, saying I wanted to show them the new house. They had been interested in our house since before construction started and responded quickly to my call. They were excited about the exterior of the new home. They wanted to see the interior soon, but I revealed the real reason I had called them here. I couldn't bring myself to say that my husband was currently in the midst of a passionate affair, so I showed them the saved camera footage instead. My mother-in-law, Laura's face turned indescribable as she watched her son's affair. It must not have been pleasant for a mother to see her son behaving like a beast. It's not strange for an adult man to be intimate with a woman, but it's not pleasant for a parent to witness, especially since the partner was his mistress. John, also a man, was already shaking with rage. It seemed unforgivable for him as a father that his married son was having an affair. Laura's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, apologized to me. John looked ready to strike his stupid son immediately, his anger seeping through. He repeatedly apologized to me, his fists clenched so tightly that they seemed ready to bleed. My in-laws apologized again, but above all, they wanted to stop the ridiculous behavior immediately and charged into the house after removing the tension rods. When they barged in, my husband and the woman had just finished their second round of passion and seemed to be basking in the afterglow. My husband had just put on his underwear when his parents suddenly appeared, causing him to freeze. Julia screamed and hurriedly threw on some clothes, but although it was better than being naked, her appearance was still indecent. Regaining his senses from Julia's scream, my husband quickly finished putting on his pants and kept repeating,
"Why?"
in obvious confusion. He likely couldn't think of anything else to say. Seeing their reaction, I couldn't help but laugh. Julia tried to escape through a window, but she couldn't open it because I had secured it with tension rods from the house. She screamed hysterically, "What's going on?" My husband suggested they retreat to the second floor, and they took the opportunity to run upstairs while my in-laws chased after them. Surprisingly, John, who had been a track athlete in his student days and still ran for his health, caught up with them quickly. He forced open the door they were trying to close. In contrast, my husband hardly exercised at all. I thought to myself, Greg's parents have won this. But my stubborn husband and Julia retreated into a walk-in closet adjacent to the room and locked themselves in.
"Enough is enough. If you're going to run away, you shouldn't have had an affair in the first place." "Why did you do this? Aren't you ashamed? Come out."
My in-laws continued to scold my husband through the door, calling him shameless. "This is such a betrayal. I'm going to divorce you, and you will both pay me compensation." Then Julia blamed my husband, saying, "You said we wouldn't get caught." My husband replied,
"We'll talk about that later. Let's just try to escape now,"
showing he hadn't given up on fleeing. Despite my in-laws urging them to surrender, my husband kept saying they could escape through a window. However, Julia refused to jump from the second floor, fearing injury. My husband tried to convince her by mentioning the potential for having to pay damages, and eventually they both jumped out of the second floor window. A thud was heard, and when we checked from the upstairs room, we saw them crumpled on the ground, unable to move. Going outside, they were both complaining of pain. Julia's leg was bent at an odd angle. My in-laws suggested leaving them be as they deserved it for their actions. However, feeling a final bit of compassion, I called an ambulance. But it was quite a sight. My husband shirtless, and Julia just in underwear covered by my husband's shirt. I watched from a distance as they struggled to answer the emergency responders' questions due to the pain. The ambulance crew, accustomed to various emergencies, could likely guess the situation from their appearance. Later, I visited my husband in the hospital with a lawyer and my in-laws to discuss divorce and compensation. After he was taken to the hospital, they contacted me to bring his insurance card, but I didn't go. My in-laws went instead, but just left what was needed at the reception and returned. When I visited my husband's hospital room, he mistakenly thought he was forgiven and waved at me with a smile. But then my in-laws showed up, and a stranger who was pushing the mistress in a wheelchair appeared. To Greg, who's in shock, the person who was pushing the mistress's wheelchair introduced himself as the lawyer I had hired and handed him a business card, causing his face to instantly freeze. It seemed that he finally realized he had not been forgiven yet. I was astounded by how delusional he could be, wondering how he could think he'd be forgiven after everything that had happened. The lawyer calmly explained the necessities to both of them and advised my husband to agree to the divorce. He stated that my stance would not change even if he refused and it went to court. The lawyer emphasized the potential consequences of a court battle on my husband's social credibility and his impact on his re-employment prospects. Hearing this, my husband reluctantly agreed to the divorce in a subdued voice. When the topic of alimony came up, he also acquiesced without resistance. As for the mistress, she seemed utterly devoid of energy, appearing indifferent to everything around her. Although my husband seemed somewhat unhappy, he complied under the stern gaze of my in-laws. I was grateful that everything was proceeding smoothly despite his reluctance. Next, I demanded that he take responsibility for the already purchased furniture and the new home. I informed him that he needed to cover the down payment and the remaining mortgage as well. John, refusing to entertain any objections, glared menacingly, but it seemed my husband did not want to take over the house. He countered while visibly intimidated by his father's stern look.
This is no joke. Isn't the house mostly decorated according to your wishes? My preferences are minor. Why should I bear the entire cost? It's unfair.
I did not want to let go of the house filled with my dreams either. It was he who had orchestrated this situation, so I showed him the saved footage from the security camera. Do you really think I can calmly live in a place where you invited your mistress and acted indecently? How rotten is your brain? With anger and despair in my voice, the lawyer stated we were not willing to compromise and were prepared to fight as long as necessary. Laura broke down crying, lamenting that she never expected her son to be so merciless.
Are you going to make your wife and your mother cry? Man up and own up to your actions.
It seemed my husband could stand up to his father, and ultimately he was subdued by a single sentence from him and agreed to follow everything the lawyer said. Just when I thought everything was resolved, an unknown elderly couple entered my husband's hospital room. They were the parents of Julia, and upon seeing my in-laws, they immediately knelt and started apologizing profusely. Julia had caused great disrespect, and Greg had been injured. It turned out they had been looking for their daughter as she wasn't in her room. However, my in-laws seemed strangely agitated, not just because of their daughter's actions.
So it was your daughter all along. The nerve.
Since my husband's affair came to light, John has been constantly irritable and extremely angry. However, his current anger seems incomparable to anything before. When I asked Laura what was going on, she revealed that the parents of my husband's mistress were running a subcontracting company that worked for John's firm. The company run by the mistress's parents was known for its lax work ethic, frequently missing deadlines and delivering poor quality, which led to numerous complaints. Despite repeated warnings, there was no improvement, so my father-in-law had discussed ending their business relationship. However, being abandoned by John's company would lead the subcontracting firm to collapse and bankruptcy. They pleaded with him not to let go, citing the livelihoods of a few employees they were responsible for. Faced with the welfare of the employees, John, being a business owner himself, felt it was not easy to simply cut them off, under the condition that if there were any further issues, they would be abandoned. He continued to give them work out of conditional mercy.
Do you remember the promise? I said there wouldn't be a next time. We will never do business with your company again.
Upon hearing this from John, the mistress's parents pulled their daughter out of the wheelchair and forced her to kneel despite her inability to kneel properly due to her cast. They insisted, saying her future depended on this and that a broken bone was a minor issue. She must kneel properly and apologize. Despite their apologies, John had no intention of changing his decision, and the mistress's parents desperately pleaded for reconsideration. Forced to kneel by her parents, the mistress screamed in pain, fearing another break. A nurse, hearing the commotion, rushed over and separated the mistress and her parents. When reprimanded by the nurse for making an injured person perform such actions, the parents argued that their livelihood depended on it, making an even bigger scene. Unable to handle the situation alone, security was called to finally eject the mistress and her parents from the husband's hospital room. Raised by such irresponsible parents, could it be that the mistress had learned to be bold enough to steal another's husband? Seeing the attitude of the mistress's parents made me think so. Being in this hospital might lead to another encounter with the mistress's parents, and it seemed likely to cause more issues regarding John's company. Wanting to avoid such scenes, I vowed never to return to this hospital. As I no longer have anything to discuss with my husband, I informed them that any further communications should go through my lawyer and left the hospital. What happened next was relayed to me by my in-laws. Due to their daughter's affair with the son of a business partner, the mistress's parents were forced to disown her as their business faced termination. Apparently, after the day of the disturbance at the hospital, her parents did not come to visit her again. The injuries were less severe for my ex-husband, and he was discharged earlier than the mistress. My ex-husband wanted to stay at his parents' house until he found a job, but his father did not allow it. With no other choice, my ex-husband began living in the new house. The mistress, having nowhere else to go, moved in with him after being discharged. The mistress and my ex-husband, having no other residence but the costly new home, lived together more out of necessity than love, just until they found somewhere else. The mistress had planned to find her own place immediately after discharge, but upon returning to her job, she was faced with dismissal. In fact, they had wanted to fire her earlier, but could not do so while she was being treated for illness or injuries. They had simply been waiting for her to recover. The reason for her dismissal was due to issues caused by her involvement with a client. Caught off guard by her dismissal, the mistress had no choice but to rely on my ex-husband. Both now unemployed, they shared the goal of saving money to leave the house, yet they constantly blamed each other for their situation and struggled to save the necessary funds. Both eager to save money quickly and sell the expensive new home, they continued to blame each other for their predicaments, leading to constant arguments. I heard that my ex-husband was struggling with the mortgage payments, unable to save money, and his debt was spiraling out of control. Lately, there have been suspicious individuals lurking around the new home, seemingly monitoring my ex-husband and the mistress. It appears that my ex-husband has borrowed money from some very dubious sources. After the divorce, I received a significant amount of money through compensation. With my promotion as planned, I decided to reward myself by building the home of my dreams. I discovered a store that offered Scandinavian interiors, which I had long admired, and decided to build a home that would suit the furniture I found there. Planning out my dream home brings me so much joy. This time, nothing is going to stop me from making it a reality.
Women should just give birth and then stay home to focus on housework and raising the kids. It's crazy to think they can work after giving birth.
I was so busy with work that I almost missed my chance to settle down. I thought my husband was okay with me wanting to keep working even after we tied the knot and had our son. He even helped with the housework when I was pregnant. But suddenly after giving birth, he changed completely. This isn't what we agreed on. Besides, I can't extend my maternity leave. It would cause tremendous trouble to my company.
What? The stuff women do at work is not even that big of a deal.
Saying this, Kevin laughed. He was so kind before I gave birth. I'm baffled. Is this really the kind man I married?
Anyway, I won't allow you to go back to work, so hand in your resignation. If you don't do as I say, we'll get divorced and I'll take custody of our son.
He pressures me about custody, but doesn't lift a finger to help with our son.
After I took in an older woman like you, who do you think you are? If we divorce, you'll never be able to get married again. Haha.
Realizing he was no longer the man I once knew, I contacted someone, never imagining this call would be his downfall. My name is Anna. I have a job in the fashion business, and some may see me as a dedicated career woman. But seen in a less positive light, I could be perceived as a single woman who has neglected her femininity in favor of her work. Just to be clear, it's not that I don't want to get married. I do hope to marry someone someday and experience the joy of being a mother. My mother died in an accident when I was young. Maybe that's why I have a strong desire to become a mother myself. But I completely missed my chance to get married because I worked too hard. Why don't you talk to your dad about it? When a dad sees his daughter tying the knot when she's past her best years, he thinks the guy is like a god to him. When I complained to my old friend Tracy, who is a mother of 2 and still works with me, she said that. I wonder if Tracy comes across as a confident married woman when we talk at the cafe near work, or if I'm just feeling envious. No way. I went against my dad's wishes in the first place. Even now in front of me, he praises Sandy. You know, the slightly tomboyish, beautiful secretary to the president? He says Sandy is homely, good at cooking, and a great support both personally and professionally. I couldn't help but ask him if he was having an affair with her or something. I said, laughing. When I asked my dad whether he was having an affair with Sandy, he vehemently denied it. Sandy looked genuinely upset, tearing up. Indeed, Sandy is younger than me. No young woman would want an old man like that. But it's difficult at work. Everyone is cautious around me, and most of them have families. I don't mind younger men, nor am I concerned about their income, but I want a partner who I can discuss things with equally and who is understanding. What about a marriage agency? A marriage agency? If you go to a reputable one, it will cost some money, but they are serious about introducing you to someone considering marriage. They check if the other party is really single and share your information as well. There's a possibility there. Tracy suggested this and even introduced me to a marriage agency. If I really want to have kids, I need to hurry up and get serious. So, I registered with a marriage agency right away. When my father found out I had registered, he said,
"Instead of spending money on that, I could introduce someone to you."
"No, you don't have to do that." I firmly rejected the idea. My father sighed. Meanwhile, I had met a few people, and one of them was Kevin. I want to continue working even after we get married. Also, I want kids, but given my age, I would like to have them soon. Despite being a 40-year-old woman, which made it difficult to find someone, Kevin was the only one who accepted this.
"I think that's a great idea."
Things progressed smoothly and we got married. When we went to greet each other's parents, my father said something.
"It's your decision, but do this, and 5 years after the marriage, whether to tell him or not is up to you."
That's fine, but why make it so complicated? I didn't understand why he told me to do that, but since it was a condition and no significant issues arose, I agreed. And so Kevin and I got married just half a year after meeting through the marriage agency. Kevin was kind even after the marriage. He didn't fuss about me working late or complain about the food I cooked. As I said before marriage, I want to do housework and childcare together.
"Sure, that's fine."
Kevin nodded at my words. Indeed, Kevin did help with cleaning and laundry when he was busy. He also prepared delicious meals, which was a great help. My in-laws who lived nearby were also kind. My father-in-law, Fred, who I've met a few times, like when we got engaged, is always busy with work, but he's totally fine with me wanting to keep working even after turning 40. My mother-in-law, Megan, is skillful and homely. Her cooking is meticulously prepared, and I could tell she takes her time with it. The reason my husband's cooking tastes similar must be because Megan taught him. And I somehow managed to get pregnant. My parents as well as my in-laws were delighted, and Megan, who enjoys handicrafts as a hobby, prepared baby items for me. Wow, this is a wonderful piece. It looks like something you'd sell in a store. Megan, why don't you try selling these? No way, I couldn't possibly do that. Nowadays, it's possible for individuals to sell things on their own, and depending on the person, they could earn as much as a regular office worker. Megan looked troubled by my words. Due to the difficulties of continuing work during pregnancy, I had taken maternity leave. This was the beginning of my journey towards my dream. Maternity leave was like a preparation period. I arranged for Tracy to help me after my maternity leave, and I also prepared for working remotely. However, I was concerned because Sandy seemed a bit down. I asked if my father had done something to her, and my father made an awful face. Despite this, when my maternity leave started, Kevin changed. He's barely lifting a finger to help out around the house or cook anymore. Well, I am at home. It's natural that I end up doing everything. I was okay with that. But according to Tracy, isn't that strange? Really? It's my first pregnancy. You seem fine without morning sickness, but normally pregnancy is unstable and it's difficult to do housework. If you're good at household chores, I would think he'd help. Sure, he can assist with looking after your son all he likes, but he can't actually carry a baby in his belly. So he should at least do the housework. You might be mistaken, but pregnancy and childbirth are just the beginning. Tracy, who's balancing work and motherhood like a boss, spoke with determination. Kevin has been promoted recently. He's going to be a father soon, and it's also about appreciating his character. I defended Kevin. He had recently been promoted to a managerial position. Naturally, he might be more focused on work considering he is about to become a father. I heard that men start to really grasp the idea of being a parent later on. Tracy seemed to ponder my words for a moment and then, with a wry smile, said, Well, good luck. You might be the boss at work, but I've been a mom longer. You'll understand the struggles of a working mom. Despite the anxieties of being an older mother, both the baby and I were healthy. Kevin's family was thrilled about the birth of a son. They're all about carrying on the family name. My father-in-law Fred, who I've hardly ever met, even took time off from his busy schedule. Looking back, that was probably the peak of my happiness. That situation would soon drastically change. Probably only Megan knew what was coming. Life after the birth was challenging. Kevin stopped doing any housework. Hey, my maternity leave is almost over. You need to start helping with the childcare and do some household chores too. I had reasons why I couldn't extend my maternity leave. Despite this, he wouldn't even soothe our crying son. Often, he wouldn't come home until late at night and had many business trips. Hey, going on business trips and coming home late? Can't you cut down on overtime at work a bit? Or even going out at night on weekends? I asked Kevin these questions, but he dismissed them with,
Stop nagging. You do it.
And then he asks,
Are you serious about returning to work?
Serious? Are you really asking that now? I've been preparing for that. I was flabbergasted by Kevin, who said this while I was putting our son to sleep.
No, it's you who is joking, right? Women are supposed to give birth and stay home to do the housework and childcare. It's crazy to think they can work after giving birth.
Excuse me? His words made me doubt his sanity. No, I've said it before we got married. I want kids, but I don't want to give up my job. That's why I marry someone who would share the household and childcare duties with me.
Normally, isn't that what women do after having a baby? Does a maternal instinct or something like that kick in?
He retorted. This isn't what we agreed on. Besides, I can't extend my maternity leave. It would cause tremendous trouble at my company.
What? The stuff women do at work is not even that big of a deal.
Kevin laughed at that. Was this really the Kevin I knew? Where had Kevin, who used to do household chores, gone? While I was thinking this, he said,
Anyway, I won't allow you to go back to work, so hand in your resignation. If you don't do as I say, we'll get divorced and I'll take custody. My dad is about to retire, but he's a high-ranking executive with a lot of personal connections. He's financially stronger than me, and he knows lawyers, so you wouldn't stand a chance in going against me. Haha.
After saying that, Kevin went out again. Why? What should I do? As I was pondering, my phone rang.
Excuse me, Anna. Is now a good time for a call?
Oh, Sandy. The caller was Sandy, my father's secretary. Sandy had a low voice for a woman, but it sounded even lower than usual, almost like a man's. Yes, my son just fell asleep, so it's fine as long as I don't speak loudly. My husband is out. Sandy said,
I see. Excuse me, Anna. Do you think you'll be able to return to work?
Is this a question for my father?
No, that's not it. This is just me being nosy, unrelated to my official duties.
Sandy prefaced, then continued.
I happened to accompany your father on a business outing to a nightclub, and there I saw your husband, Kevin.
What? At a nightclub? I almost raised my voice in surprise.
Yes, and it seemed that Fred, Kevin's father, was with him. Excuse me, but I was concerned about your family situation, so I asked the club's owner. They're not part of the staff there, but it seems both of them are involved in inappropriate relations at their company.
Are you serious? I was at a loss for words. Caught between the preparations for work, first-time parenting, and housework, the last thing I expected was Kevin having an affair, and with my father-in-law involved too.
Anna, I had to let you know something that might shake things up with your family. I feel bad about it, but I couldn't keep it from you.
Sandy apologized, but I responded thoughtfully. I'm sorry, Sandy. I don't mean to doubt what you've told me, but I'm a bit skeptical about this. Can you try to find some proof or ask other people if they saw that too?
All right.
Following our conversation, Sandy promised to present evidence. The recorder she provided captured Kevin and Fred speaking terribly about me, calling me an old woman, and he even revealed that Megan, not Kevin, had been doing all the housework which I had believed he was handling. With that, I left a note saying I was filing for divorce and left the house with my son. Since I was about to return to work, it was crucial to act quickly. Sandy had arranged for me to stay in an apartment close to my job. As Tracy helped me move, she chuckled. You're really capable at work, but there's something missing in your personal life. You should have realized this sooner. Then Tracy asked seriously, So, what are you going to do now? I'm going to fight back. He's been using our savings to wine and dine with his side piece. Right then, Kevin called, which was timely. What do you want?
Why did you take our son?
Do you think I believe you're capable of looking after him? It seemed he had no issue with me leaving. Probably he'd let his mother handle everything at home anyway. When I pointed this out, Kevin retorted.
Of course, it's Mom's job. She understands a woman's duties well.
You're going to burden your mother, who's nearly 60, with all this? Are you trying to kill her?
Shut up. I did you a favor by marrying an old woman like you. You think you can raise a child without money after we get a divorce? I'll make sure you pay up for this. Just wait and see, you'll regret what you did.
Hearing that doesn't scare me. It takes guts to be the one to end things. Spare me the drama. I'm not planning on regretting anything. In fact, I think you'll be the one with regrets. And just so you're prepared, I'll be the one claiming compensation. I always pick up the fights that come my way. I declared that I would not let him do whatever he wanted. Later, a meeting was arranged through lawyers. Fred appeared visibly upset, and Kevin was still acting arrogantly, while Megan seemed troubled. On my side were my lawyer, my father, and also Sandy.
If we're divorcing, I want compensation.
Save your sleep talk for bed, I declared firmly.
Sleep talk? That's on your part.
He argued back arrogantly.
Firstly, a woman's unstable, low income is not enough to raise a child. Hand over the grandchild quietly and pay compensation and child support. If you refuse, come back quietly. We were generous enough to take in a leftover single parent like you. Kevin, you too. You should have gone for a young, dumb woman who'd listen instead. That's true, Dad, but a mistress is better for that sort of woman. At least she had money. I go easy on young women, and it's tough to break up with them when they get older and you're already married.
Hearing Fred and Kevin's words, I couldn't believe my ears. Saying such things in front of me and my father? I thought I had a good eye for people, but it seems I lacked judgment when it comes to men. I sighed. Unfortunately for you, the one who'll be paying compensation is you. At the same time, Sandy presented evidence of Kevin's infidelity. Adultery is sufficient ground for divorce and a claim for damages. Plus, I've meticulously recorded the childcare, which proves you did nothing. Do you really think you can get custody in this situation? Kevin's lawyer seemed shocked, probably only hearing Kevin and Fred's side of the story.
But you don't have the financial means.
Sadly, it's you who lacks financial resources. I stated clearly. Here's my business card, by the way. I showed my newly printed business card.
Huh? What's the use of your stupid business card?
He scoffed, but his demeanor froze as he read the company name on the card and snatched it to read the details.
What's going on, Kevin?
Kevin stuttered, unable to speak.
No way. You're the CEO at our parent company? CEO? What? No way she'd be in that position.
In fact, I'm the CEO of their parent company. At this revelation, both Fred and Megan were visibly shocked.
Our company is the parent company of yours, you see. I had my daughter join from scratch to develop her skills on her own. If she's to succeed me, she needs to prove her worth. I was surprised her husband turned out to be an employee at one of our subsidiary companies. I instructed her to keep this a secret from you for at least 5 years. Only the president of your company knows about it. I haven't asked for her to be treated specially, though. Just because you're the CEO of the parent company doesn't mean you can fire employees like me.
Kevin exclaimed, but Sandy responded.
Unfortunately, it was us who investigated the affair. It seems he was involved with a temp worker from the company having inappropriate relations during work hours, even using company expenses for hotel visits and trips. As a company, we cannot overlook an employee who engages in misconduct, regardless of his relationship to my daughter. Besides the compensation, it looks like you'll have to face consequences. I'll have to speak to the president of your company about your responsibilities. It's a shame for our family, really. My poor daughter has been treated terribly and subjected to such harsh treatment.
Fred panicked and said,
Please, forgive us. I'll disown this foolish son of mine. Dad, how could you?
Despite Kevin's shocked response, Father continued.
As I said, his punishment will be decided by the president of his company.
Father then turned to me.
Now, about the divorce. Are you going to sue them? If you do, we'll fight it thoroughly, but I don't think they have a chance of winning.
Those words crushed Kevin. Fred kept trying to get on people's good side, ditching his son. And so the divorce was finalized smoothly. Their lawyer didn't even plan to contest it, claiming there had been a misunderstanding. Wow. I was explaining the situation to Tracy, who had become a secretary at my workplace. She nodded as she listened. Afterwards, I was able to run the company well while my son was looked after at the company's daycare. Kevin was fired from the company. He had angered my father and hadn't made a good impression to me either. It was risky to keep him around. Fred was also demoted and sidelined to a less important department. So his father wasn't fired? Fred is retiring in about a year anyway. Plus, he needs to receive his severance pay. Huh? What do you mean? When Fred and Megan get a divorce, Megan can get money through the division of assets, I said with a smile. Megan was kind, you know. She even tried to help with household chores during my pregnancy. Fred had told her not to spill the beans until after I gave birth. She was also worried she couldn't make it financially if she divorced at her age. A strong lawyer for the divorce and Megan's crafting skills, which are excellent. She's actually making a profit from selling her crafts. Now, even without that husband, she can live independently. Fred, who lacks domestic skills, has been disowned by his son and doesn't even know how to contact him. Is in for a hard time as he gets older, and will likely have to cough up a lot of money. I grinned. Kevin would no longer be able to work in this industry. I was counting on child support and didn't need it, but I was still claiming it. But does that mean I'm also out of the marriage game?
Then what about me?
This was said by Sandy, who had transitioned from being my father's secretary to mine. Huh? No, Sandy, I think you can definitely get married. You're tall, attractive, and will surely find a wonderful husband, unlike me. Sandy sighed, and for some reason, Tracy burst into laughter.
Anna?
Sandy sighed, then said as he placed some documents down.
I'm a man.
What?
I've been attracted to you since I joined the company. I worked hard to become the president's secretary so I could be worthy of marrying you. The president was even planning to introduce me as a potential husband for you.
I was taken aback by his words. I guess I really do lack judgment when it comes to men. What? I don't understand at all. When I went to a city I usually don't visit for shopping, I witnessed my husband and my mother walking arm in arm, kissing each other openly without any reservations. I was taken aback, so I rushed over and questioned them. But they weren't sorry at all. They just confidently explained themselves. I immediately went to my parents' house, told my father about the two of them, and got a divorce. But after my father passed away, I had to meet my mother and ex-husband again. I noticed my mother wearing loose clothes and her belly sticking out when I saw her after a long time. Noticing my gaze, she laughed triumphantly. "Oh, you noticed? I'm pregnant. You've been waiting, but it seems you couldn't get pregnant."
Unlike you, we were able to have a child quickly. Now I can finally become a father. I'm glad I divorced you.
The two of them hurled insults meant to hurt me as much as possible. However, their intentions were misplaced. Unfortunately for them, I was not hurt at all. Oh, this is funny. Both of you are such fools. I held my stomach and laughed. My name is Mary, a 24-year-old office worker. My parents had me when they were very young. It was what you might call a shotgun wedding. Both of my parents were quite flashy when they were young, and my mother, Abby, met my father, Keith, when she was just 16 and still in high school. He was 4 years her senior and working in construction when they met and had me. Their love story began when my mother fell in love with my father at first sight and aggressively pursued him until he gave in and they started dating. Soon after, my mother got pregnant and they got married. Being married while still in high school was frowned upon by society, and there was strong opposition from those around them. However, since my mother was already pregnant with me, they had to accept the marriage. At first, everything seemed to be going great for the young couple and their marriage. My father would come get me in kindergarten on days he couldn't work in construction because of the rain. "Mary, your dad is so young and cool." "Right? I love my dad. He's so kind." I enjoyed sharing an umbrella and talking about the day's events with my father on the way home. However, an accident happened to my father which drastically changed my mother's attitude towards him. During the dismantling of scaffolding at work, he accidentally fell and suffered severe injuries. My father got all beat up and broke a bunch of bones, so now he can't move around much. And then my mother just shut down emotionally out of nowhere. Thankfully, he survived, but he was left with physical disabilities and could no longer continue his construction work. Thanks to rehabilitation, my father was able to walk again and managed to re-employ himself through a friend at a corporation. However, he still needed long-term rehabilitation after being discharged from the hospital. Despite this, my mother refused to have anything to do with his commuting to the clinic or daily assistance, ignoring him when he fell in the hallway and couldn't move, or throwing sarcastic comments his way. "Ugh, look at you, falling over. Ugh, how pathetic. Marrying such a burden was a mistake. I should have looked at other men before settling down." As a child, my mother would frequently vent her frustrations about my father as if it was a habit. However, to me, it seemed like she was just bullying him, and I honestly didn't like her very much. Since my father had to reduce his work to attend hospital appointments, we were far from a wealthy family. My mother worked at night, so I spent more time during the day with my father and felt closer to him than to my mother. She probably saw that, or maybe she just never really cared for kids, but my mother pretty much ignored me and only did the basics for me. I was at least allowed to finish high school, but after graduating, my mother told me to work to help with the household finances instead of going to college. So I ended up working at a small local company.
I'm sorry, Mary. It's because of my condition that you have to bear such a burden.
Don't say that. I'm happy to work if it helps you, even a little. My father apologized, looking regretful as I decided to work without pursuing further education. Even though I wasn't feeling doing things my mother's way, I was going to push through for my father. After a few years of employment and getting accustomed to my job, I married Greg, a colleague at work. I wanted to create a warm family life with him, unlike the cold relationship my parents had.
I'll take care of you, Mary. Let's be happy together. I want lots of children.
I happily accepted his proposal, delighted by his words. However, a year into our marriage, there was no sign of children between Greg and me. I wanted children, but no matter how long I waited, there were no signs of pregnancy. Greg started pressuring me as if it was entirely my fault.
Why can't we have kids? All my colleagues already have children. There must be something wrong with your body. Ugh, what a disappointment for a wife.
Don't say that. It's not just my problem. I want you to go to the gynecologist with me for tests.
What? Why should I bother with such a hassle? I've been healthy and never even got a cold. It's definitely your fault we don't have kids.
My husband wouldn't even consider fertility treatments and just kept blaming me for not getting pregnant.
Stop making excuses and get treated at a hospital. It's crushing my reputation to be married and not have kids.
No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen, and he continued to blame me one-sidedly. Yet clinging to a thread of hope, I struggled alone with fertility treatments, but there was still no sign of a child. Gradually, Greg started not coming home. He claimed he was busy with work and often returned home in the morning. I thought, is it really work? I wonder, could he be cheating? That time too. I had several reasons to doubt my husband. Sometimes I smelled women's perfume on his clothes when he returned home in the morning, not just once, but several times. Furthermore, when I checked the credit card statements, there were regularly unexplained expenses, which fueled my suspicions even more. However, I thought confronting him directly would just result in him evading the issue, so I was looking for the right moment to talk. The opportunity came sooner than expected. When I went shopping in a city I usually don't visit, I saw my husband who has said he was working that day. I thought, is that Greg? But he's supposed to be working today. I was about to call out when I noticed a woman beside him. I thought, huh? Why are Mom and Greg walking together? There, my mother was walking beside him, smiling cheerfully. Since getting married, I have kept a distance from my mother. I visited my father at home occasionally, but I hardly ever brought my husband to my parents' house. There shouldn't have been any conversation between my husband and my mother since our marriage greetings. Wondering about this, I watched their actions without calling out, and to my surprise, they held hands affectionately and eventually kissed right in front of me. What? I don't understand. I exclaimed out loud. Unaware of my astonishment, the two of them continued walking away. Finally, I shouted out, "Hey, Greg! Mom! What are you doing?" When I ran after them and called out, they looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Oh, what's wrong, Mary? Why are you in such a hurry?" "What do you mean, what's wrong? What are you two doing?" "I don't know what you're talking about. I just happened to meet Greg and we were just saying hello after a long time. Is there a problem?" It seemed my mother intended to play dumb. The way my mother dressed made her look young. If not told, one wouldn't think she was in her 40s. Approaching my mother, I realized something. I thought, this scent. I smelled it somewhere before. Then, I recognized the smell of my mom's perfume. It was the same scent I had smelled on my husband's clothes when he came home late. I didn't want to believe it, but I was convinced that my mother was my husband's affair partner. "Don't lie. I just saw you and Greg kissing."
Huh? It must be some mistake. We just bumped into each other.
When confronted, they looked momentarily flustered and exchanged glances, but after a brief silence, Greg spoke as if giving up.
I didn't think it would come out this soon. Why are you even here?
"What do you mean by that?"
I thought I could fool you a bit longer since you're so clueless, but I didn't expect to be seen. Well, as you might have guessed, I actually prefer older women.
"Sorry.
I did feel bad for you, Mary, but I liked Greg from the moment we first met. My mom and husband didn't hold back and confessed to the unbelievable truth. We just happened to meet one time, and as we talked over a cup of coffee, well, one thing led to another. I'm still young, and I want to experience love.
Our marriage was already rocky, and the more I talked to Abby, the more I was drawn to her.
I heard, Mary, that you were having trouble having kids. Greg really wants a son, and it's your fault that he can't have one. Poor thing.
I can't believe it. You told my mom that? Because it's true. There must be something wrong with your body that you can't have kids.
Unbelievably, my husband has shared all our very private marital issues with my mother. Despite my struggles with not being able to have children and his refusal to listen to any of my consultations, my husband blamed me as if he were the victim. Anger welled up inside me, and I realized I could never continue my married life with this man. You're the worst. Do you even realize what you did? I yelled at the two of them as they nonchalantly made excuses. It can't be helped. You're a failure as a wife and as a woman, so this is what happens. What? I never even want a husband like you. I don't need you anymore. Give me a divorce. Sure. Honestly, I've been bored with you for a long time, always making excuses and not being able to have kids. It's relieving to think I can be rid of a defective wife like you. Oh, I didn't mean for this to happen, but I guess I ended up stealing your precious husband. Sorry about that. Despite not really feeling sorry, my mother offered a mere lip service apology. You realize if you tell Dad about this affair, he'll divorce you. You better be prepared. Upon hearing this, my mother's face changed, but she quickly returned to her complacent expression. There's no proof of the affair anyway. It's up to you and Greg if you want to divorce, but I'll divorce when I feel like it. Now, Greg, let's go. Prompted by my mother, the two of them left me behind and hurried away. Although clearly in an adulterous relationship, unlike Greg, my mother didn't want to divorce my father just yet. I immediately went to my parents' house and told my father about them. So I thought she needed a mother for Mary and endured it for years. But I never expected her to disregard her daughter like this. Upon hearing my report, my father grimaced as if he had bitten into a sour bug. Greg and I are getting a divorce. I can't imagine staying married after what happened. What will you do about Mom? Don't worry, I have a plan. I won't let them have their way. Later, Greg sent me a divorce paper already filled out, which I signed, and our divorce was finalized. My mother hasn't returned home since then, and it seems she eloped with Greg. Although I was upset, my father told me to let them go, and I decided to forget about my ex-husband and mother. After that, I moved out of the apartment where Greg and I lived and returned to my parents' house. My father's condition had improved significantly, and he could almost take care of himself. Ironically, my mother's total lack of assistance seemed to have helped. Though things turned out this way, I'm happy to be living with Mary again. Thanks for coming home. I have been enjoying a brief period of peace with my father, but that life did not last long. Father caught pneumonia that was going around, and suddenly he was on the brink of death. Mary, I've made you endure so much up until now, and I'm truly sorry. From now on, live as you wish. As he was about to pass away, within his fading consciousness, he gripped my hand tightly and said that. With tears in my eyes, I nodded. Despite the efforts to treat him, my father's condition rapidly worsened, and he passed away. I thought, Dad, can't believe you passed away so suddenly. I wish I had been there more to take care of you. As I was preparing for my father's funeral, an unexpected person visited our home. Long time no see. I heard he died. My mother and my ex-husband, Greg, were at the door. Wearing unpleasant smiles, they boldly walked into the house. What do you want now? Leave. What? Who do you think you are? He was my husband. Isn't it natural for a wife to come running when her husband dies? How can you say that after you eloped and cut off all contact for years? Whatever. Say what you want. But no matter how much you scream, I was his wife. That means I have a right to his assets. He had insurance, didn't he? Ugh, I'm appalled. So that's why you didn't divorce Dad? After retiring from his construction job due to an injury, my father worked diligently in a company and had reached a considerable position before he passed away. Even though he didn't go to school, I bet it was all the hard work he put in as a craftsman that made him tough. He had many colleagues who admired his caring nature. It was worth not divorcing him. Now let's talk about dividing his assets. He wasn't materialistic, so I know he must have saved a lot. Saying this, my mother approached me aggressively. Looking at her, I noticed something. My mother was wearing baggy clothes, and you could totally tell that her belly was big. When she noticed my gaze, she laughed triumphantly. Oh, you noticed? Yes, I'm carrying Greg's child. Seems you could manage to do that, Mary. I'll bear the child instead of you.
Unlike you, we were able to have a child quickly. Now I can finally become a father. I'm glad I divorced you.
The two of them hurled the most hurtful insults they could. However, their plans were to be thwarted. Unfortunately for them, I was not affected at all. Oh, this is funny. Both of you are such fools. I held my stomach and laughed. Seeing this, they looked at me bewildered.
What's so funny?
Because it's just ridiculous. But hey, this might be hard to say, but are you sure that child is really yours? At my words, Greg seemed offended and asked back, Huh? But my mother's demeanor suddenly shifted. Her eyes darted around, visibly shaken. Yet Greg seemed oblivious to her discomfort.
She's pregnant with my child, no doubt. Don't say nonsense just because you're bitter.
Yes, that's right. Stop being so sore. Huh. Well, seeing this will clear things up. I stepped away and grabbed a document I had kept, presenting it before them. What's this all of a sudden? Huh? What?
What's so shocking about it? It must be nothing. Huh? What does this mean?
Both were stunned as they read the contents of the document. It was a report from a detective agency summarizing my mother's affairs. After she eloped with Greg, I happened to see her in town by chance. However, she wasn't with Greg, but with a completely unknown young man. Following them discreetly, they entered a hotel. I thought, what does this mean? Could it be that Mom is... I consulted with my father before his death and decided to investigate my mother's conduct, thinking it might prove useful someday. The detective's investigation confirmed that my mother was indeed involved with a man other than Greg. Greg, reading the document desperately, saw detailed information about my mother and her lover. After finishing the report, Greg glared at my mother beside him.
What is this? Were you deceiving me?
That's not true at all. Mary is lying. This child in my belly is yours, for sure. While my mother was flustered, she insisted that the child was definitely Greg's. Who are you going to believe? This child and me, or her?
Well, that's right. She couldn't have kids herself, so she's framing her own mother. What a terrible woman.
Greg was persuaded by my mother and seemed to regain his composure. Deciding the report was a lie, he began blaming me, ignoring their own issues. It's your freedom to not believe, but unfortunately I have decisive proof. You can come out now. I called into the living room next to where we were. The door opened, and a man entered.
Huh? Who is that?
Who is he? I don't know him either. Both were puzzled by the appearance of the unfamiliar man. This is my husband. You wouldn't know, but I got remarried. His name is Ryan. A year after divorcing Greg, I remarried him, whom I met through a friend.
How does this man prove anything?
Unlike Mom, it might not show yet, but I'm also pregnant. Of course, with his child.
So what? Say it clearly.
You still don't understand? When I was married to you, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't have a baby. But with him, with Ryan, I got pregnant right away. Greg seemed to realize the implication of my words and widened his eyes in shock. You didn't want to deal with the hassle of going to the hospital, but I did get tested and found out that there was nothing wrong with my fertility. That means the problem was with you.
That's not true.
But it's strange, isn't it? Despite being supposedly hard for you to have children, my mother is pregnant. Are you sure it's really your child? As I questioned him, Greg couldn't argue and instead glared at Abby beside him.
Hey, tell the truth.
Fine, you win. Oh, you admitted it pretty quickly. I thought you would try to deceive us more. It was just a fling with Greg anyway.
What do you mean by that?
I was with you because you were Mary's husband. You know, it's tempting to want what someone else has, but my real relationship was with another man. I was planning to break up with you soon anyway. Greg was shocked by my mother's words and stood there dumbfounded. I was enjoying the affair until it got spoiled. Well, it doesn't matter whose child I'm carrying. My rights to his inheritance remain unchanged. Are you still talking about that? Unfortunately, you'll have to give that up. Huh? How many times do I have to say this? I wasn't divorced from my dead husband. I have the rights to the inheritance. That's what I'm telling you. You don't have any rights, because you and Dad were actually divorced a long time ago. Huh? That can't be. Maybe you've forgotten because you're getting older, but Dad had a divorce paper that you had signed already. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, he revealed that he had a divorce paper. According to my father, during a big fight when he became unable to work because of his injury, my mother had shoved the already filled out divorce paper at him, saying, I don't need a husband who can't move. Though he kept it without filing because I was still there, my father had used that divorce paper to legally separate from her before he died. So, Mom, you won't get a penny from Dad's estate. Do you understand now? Huh? That's... Upon hearing my words, my mother, who had been acting so confidently, turned pale. Greg was still glaring at her. I'm going home. After realizing her affair had been exposed and that she wouldn't receive any inheritance, my mother fled the house as if running away. Later, my mother did give birth to a boy, but it was clear without even a DNA test, just from the blood type, that he wasn't Greg's child. Greg, having said,
I never thought she was such a whore,
discarded my mother when he realized he couldn't get any inheritance and disappeared. The man who was supposedly my mother's main affair partner also fled upon learning of her pregnancy, as he had only been in a casual relationship with her. Eventually, my mother, at the age of 40, became a single mother with a young child. With no one to turn to, she's raising the child of the man who abandoned her with government assistance. Being an older mother, she seems to be aging significantly due to the strain of raising a small child. One time I saw my mother far away with her son, and she looked more like a grandmother than a mother with all that gray hair. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy girl, and now our family of 3 lives happily. Thinking about it, the child my mother had is my brother, and he will be in the same school year as my daughter, which is quite complicated. We plan to visit my father's grave together on the anniversary of his death. Though the betrayal of my ex-husband and mother was painful, it also led me to find an invaluable family. He must be watching over us from heaven, don't you think? My Father in heaven must be happy about the birth of his granddaughter. With the love he gave us, I vow to keep walking closely with my family.